The night sky over the Pacific burned orange. It was March 18, 1945, and Captain Robert "Dutch" Harmon could smell the fuel before he could see it, a sickly sweet vapor mixing with smoke and hydraulic fluid, filling the cramped cockpit of his B-29 Superfortress. Behind him, somewhere in the fuselage, something was still burning. The fire suppression system had dumped its load 10 minutes ago. Now there was nothing between his crew and the flames except aluminum skin and prayer. They were 1,200 miles from Hawaii. 2 engines were dead. Fuel was streaming from the left wing in a silver ribbon that caught the moonlight like a scar across the darkness. "Dutch, we're losing pressure in number 3. That was Lieutenant Tommy Kraft, his co-pilot, voice steady but tight. 23 years old. Farm kid from Nebraska who'd never seen the ocean until the war sent him across it. Harmon's hands moved across the controls with the mechanical precision of a man who'd flown 72 missions and knew that hesitation killed faster than flak. "Feather it. Transfer fuel from the left wing tanks before we lose it all." The B-29 shuddered, dropping 200 feet in 3 seconds. Behind them, in the waist gunner position, someone screamed, a raw sound that cut through the intercom and stopped abruptly. Harmon didn't ask who. He couldn't afford to. They'd been part of a 334 bomber raid on Kobe, Japan's 6th largest city. The mission briefing had been routine: high-altitude precision bombing of industrial targets, standard defensive formations, expected fighter resistance. What they hadn't expected was the new Japanese tactic: kamikaze fighters deliberately ramming B-29s at altitude, trading one pilot for 12. The Zero had come out of the sun at 28,000 feet, screaming past 3 other bombers to lock onto Harmon's aircraft. His tail gunner, Sergeant Mike Chen, had fired 400 rounds and hit the fighter at least 20 times. It hadn't mattered. The Zero pilot had held his course, ramming into the B-29's left wing root with the force of a meteorite. The explosion had been instantaneous. Engine number 1 had disintegrated, shrapnel from the fighter's engine tearing through number 2 like a shotgun blast. The wing had buckled, fuel lines rupturing, hydraulic fluid spraying across hot metal. Fire had erupted immediately, a brilliant orange bloom that consumed the wing's leading edge and began eating its way toward the fuel tanks. Flight Engineer Sergeant Paul Dietrich had crawled out onto the burning wing with a handheld extinguisher, hanging onto a maintenance rail with one hand while spraying foam with the other. The slipstream at 240 miles per hour had nearly torn him off. He'd emptied 3 extinguishers before the automatic system finally kicked in and drowned the wing in CO2. But the damage was done. The impact had sheared off 6 feet of the wing's leading edge. The fuel tanks were compromised, leaking a steady stream of 100-octane aviation gasoline into the Pacific wind. 2 engines were completely destroyed. Number 1 was gone, just a blackened hole where 2,200 horsepower had been, and number 2 was seized solid, its propeller windmilling uselessly. Number 3 was running rough, cylinder temperatures climbing into the red, and number 4, the only engine on the left side still producing power, was carrying a load it was never designed to handle. Harmon had done the math in his head. With 2 engines out and massive fuel loss, they had 3 options: ditch in the Pacific and hope for rescue, try to make it to Iwo Jima, or push for Hawaii. Iwo Jima was closer, 850 miles. But Iwo was barely secured. The island was still a battlefield. The single runway was under constant artillery fire from Japanese holdouts in the caves. Landing a crippled B-29 in a combat zone with wounded aboard was a death sentence. Hawaii was 1,200 miles. Against the wind. With 2 engines dead and fuel hemorrhaging into the night. "We're going for Hawaii," Harmon said. Co-pilot Kraft turned to look at him, eyes wide. "Dutch, we'll never make it. The fuel." "I know." Harmon's voice was flat. "But we're not dying in a ditch, and we're not getting shot to pieces on Iwo. Transfer everything to the right-wing tanks. Shut down anything that draws power. We fly light, We fly lean, and we fly straight. Behind them, Navigator Lieutenant James Park was already plotting the course, his hands moving across charts with desperate speed. Heading 270. If we maintain current speed and the wind doesn't shift, we might have enough fuel. What about number 3? Kraft asked. The temp's still climbing. Harmon glanced at the engine instruments. Cylinder head temperature on number 3 was 285 degrees Celsius and rising. Maximum operating temperature was 260. At 300, the engine would likely seize or catch fire. They couldn't afford to lose another engine. Richen the mixture on 3, Harmon ordered. Burn more fuel to cool it down. We're already burning fuel we don't have, Kraft said quietly. Then we burn it faster and hope we get there before it runs out. The intercom crackled. Captain, this is Dietrich. The flight engineer's voice was hoarse, damaged from breathing smoke and CO2. We've got wounded. Chen took shrapnel in the chest and left leg. He's stable but needs a hospital. Rodriguez has second-degree burns on his hands and face. Kimball's unconscious, head injury from the impact. Answer. Brennan didn't make it. Staff Sergeant Eddie Brennan. Waist gunner. 20 years old. Had a girl back in Portland who sent him letters every week. Harmon had read some of them. Brennan had liked to share the funny parts, the mundane details of life back home that felt like oxygen in the thin air of war. Copy that, Harmon said. His voice didn't shake. It couldn't. How's the fire? Out. But the wing structure is compromised. I can see through the skin in some places. And Captain, the fuel leak isn't stopping. We're leaving a vapor trail you could see from orbit. Harmon looked out at the left wing. Even in the darkness, he could see the silver stream of fuel atomizing in the slipstream, creating a visible mist that extended back for hundreds of feet. If a spark hit that vapor. Everyone stay off the intercom unless it's an emergency, Harmon said. Park, give me a time and distance check every 15 minutes. Dietrich, do what you can for the wounded. Kraft, help me hold this thing level. The B-29 groaned, metal flexing and popping as the asymmetric thrust from the remaining engines tried to pull the aircraft into a spiral. Harmon's legs were already aching from the constant pressure on the rudder pedals, fighting to keep the nose pointed west. His arms burned from holding the control yoke, compensating for the damaged wing's tendency to drop. 70,000 pounds of aircraft, weapons, equipment, and men, suspended over the Pacific by 2 engines and stubbornness. Below them, the ocean was a black void. No lights. No reference points. Just darkness and the sound of 2 Wright R-3350 radial engines screaming at maximum continuous power, and 2 dead engines rattling in the wind like warnings. Dutch, Kraft said quietly, you know we might not make it. Yeah. The crew should know. Harmon keyed the intercom. Listen up. We took a bad hit. We've got 2 engines out, fuel leaking, and 1,200 miles to Hawaii. The odds aren't good. If anyone wants to bail out now, I won't stop you. The water's cold but survivable. Rescue planes will be out at first light. Silence on the intercom. 10 seconds. 20. Then Dietrich's voice. With all due respect, Captain, go to hell. We didn't fly 73 missions to drown in the Pacific. A chorus of agreement crackled through the static. Harmon felt something tighten in his chest. Not fear, but something closer to pride. All right then. Hang on. It's going to be a long night. The B-29 droned westward, bleeding fuel and altitude, carrying 11 men and 1 body through the darkness toward a destination that grew more impossible with every passing mile. The first hour would be the easiest. After that, the real dying would begin. The numbers didn't lie, and Lieutenant James Park hated them for it. He sat at his navigator station, cramped in the nose of the B-29, surrounded by charts and instruments and the green glow of the radar scope. His slide rule moved back and forth across the calculations with mechanical precision, and every calculation told him the same thing. They were dead men flying. "Captain, this is Park. 1 hour check." He kept his voice level. "We've covered 178 miles. Current ground speed 185 knots. Fuel consumption is higher than estimated due to the asymmetric power configuration. At current rate, we'll run dry approximately 160 miles short of Hawaii." Through the cockpit window above him, Harmon's voice came down flat and certain. "Copy that. Keep plotting." Park bent back over his charts. The mathematics of survival were brutally simple. A B-29 carried 9,180 gallons of fuel in 8 self-sealing tanks. They'd burned roughly 3,000 gallons on the bombing run to Kobe. The collision had ruptured the left wing tanks, dumping an estimated 1,500 gallons into the Pacific in the first 10 minutes. The leak had slowed but not stopped. They were losing approximately 40 gallons per hour, a steady hemorrhage that no amount of fuel management could stop. That left them with roughly 4,600 gallons. Maybe less. 4 engines would burn that in about 6 hours at cruise power. But they only had 2 engines producing full power and 1 running hot and rough. The asymmetric thrust meant higher drag, which meant higher fuel consumption. And they couldn't reduce power. If they slowed down, they'd lose altitude, and if they lost altitude, they'd lose range. The math was inescapable. They would run out of fuel before reaching Hawaii. Unless something changed. "Dietrich, this is Park. Can we dump any weight?" The flight engineer's response came immediately. "Already done. We jettisoned every .50 cal round we had left, about 4,000 rounds, roughly 500 pounds. Threw out every piece of non-essential equipment. The armor plating from the gunner positions. Extra oxygen bottles. Personal gear. Even the coffee pot. What about the bombs?" "Already gone. Dumped the bay the second we cleared Japan." Park made another calculation. "What if we climb? Get above 10,000 feet, lean out the mixture, reduce drag." Harmon's voice came through, strained with effort. "Can't climb. The wing's damaged. I'm losing lift on the left side. We go higher, we might not be able to hold level flight. And if number 3 quits, we're going down fast." Park looked at his chart, at the tiny pencil line representing their course, at the vast empty space between their current position and the Hawaiian Islands. On paper, it looked like nothing, just inches. In reality, it was 1,000 miles of cold Pacific water, dotted with exactly 0 places to land. He switched frequencies on the radio. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is B-29 serial number 44 to 70,016, call sign Silver Lady. We are damaged and losing fuel, approximately 1,100 miles east of Oahu, heading 270. 2 engines out, 1 running rough. 11 souls on board, 1 Kia, 3 wounded. Requesting emergency vector to nearest airfield and search and rescue standby." The radio hissed static. Then a voice, distant and broken. "Silver Lady, this is Hickam. Tower. Read you, weak. Confirm, position and status." Park repeated the message, adding coordinates, altitude, airspeed. The response was fragmented, cut by distance and atmospheric interference, but he caught enough. Rescue aircraft would launch at dawn, flying their projected course. If they went down, boats would be dispatched. If they went down. In the cockpit above, Kraft's voice cut through the darkness. "Dutch, number 3 temp is 292 and climbing. We can't keep pushing it like this." Harmon didn't hesitate. "We don't have a choice. The second we reduce power, we start sinking. We sink, we lose range. We lose range, we don't make it. If that engine seizes, We lose it anyway. Then we fly on one engine. But we don't quit while it's still running. Behind them, in the radio operator's compartment, Technical Sergeant Bill Morrison was cycling through every frequency he had, broadcasting their position on every channel, hoping someone, somewhere, might be close enough to help. The radio waves carried nothing back but static and distance. In the waist gunner section, Flight Engineer Dietrich knelt beside Sergeant Mike Chen, checking the makeshift bandages he'd wrapped around the tail gunner's chest and leg. Chen's face was gray, slick with sweat despite the cold. Shrapnel from the Zero's engine had punched through the tail section, tearing through Chen's position like a bomb. A 6-inch piece of steel had lodged in his chest, missing his heart by less than 2 inches. Another piece had opened his left thigh to the bone. Dietrich had stopped the bleeding with pressure bandages and morphine, but Chen needed surgery. Soon. "How you doing, Mike?" Dietrich asked. Chen's eyes flickered open. "Living the dream, Sarge." His voice was weak, threaded with pain. "Are we going to make it?" Dietrich looked at the fuel gauges he'd been monitoring from the engineer's station. The needles were falling steadily, marching toward empty with mathematical certainty. "Yeah," he lied. "We're going to make it." 2 compartments back, Radioman Rodriguez sat with his burned hands wrapped in torn parachute silk, the only clean cloth Dietrich could find. The fire suppressant foam had saved his life but not his skin. His palms and fingers were blistered and raw where he'd grabbed burning metal while fighting the initial blaze. He couldn't hold a pencil, couldn't operate the radio, couldn't do anything but sit and breathe through the pain. Next to him, Waist Gunner Kimball was starting to come around, groaning softly, one hand moving slowly to the swollen gash on his forehead where the impact had slammed him into a support beam. Blood had crusted in his hair, dark and stiff. And further back, covered with someone's jacket, Staff Sergeant Eddie Brennan lay still. The shrapnel that killed him had been quick at least, a single piece of metal through the skull, instant and final. Dietrich had closed his eyes and left him there, because moving bodies around a crippled aircraft at 8,000 feet seemed like asking for more bad luck than they'd already earned. "Captain, this is Dietrich. I'm reading fuel quantity at 3,800 gallons and dropping. The leak from the left wing hasn't stopped." "Copy. How much are we losing?" "Still about 40 gallons per hour. Maybe a little less. It's hard to tell." In the cockpit, Kraft did the math out loud. "If we're burning 720 gallons per hour on 2 engines and losing another 40 to the leak, that's 760 per hour total. With 3,800 gallons left, that gives us 5 hours of fuel." Park's voice came up from the nose. "We need 6 hours to reach Hawaii at current speed." Silence filled the intercom. The only sounds were the roar of 2 engines at maximum power, the whistle of wind through damaged metal, and the steady drip-drip-drip of fuel leaking into darkness. "Then we make the fuel last 6 hours, Harmon said. "How?" Kraft's voice cracked slightly. Harmon stared at the engine instruments, at the fuel gauges, at the altimeter that showed 7,800 feet and slowly dropping. His mind worked through possibilities, discarding each one as quickly as it formed. They couldn't reduce power. They'd lose altitude and range. They couldn't climb. The damaged wing wouldn't support it. They couldn't stop the leak. They couldn't make fuel appear out of thin air. But they could burn it more efficiently. "Dietrich, how much fuel is in the Tokyo tanks?" The Tokyo tanks, 2 small reserve tanks in the outer wing sections, normally used for ferry flights. Each held about 200 gallons. Checking. Right Tokyo tank is full, 210 gallons. Left Tokyo tank took damage in the collision, reading 0. Can you transfer the right Tokyo tank fuel to the main system? Yes, sir, but it'll take time. The transfer pump is slow. Do it. Park, plot me a course that takes advantage of any tailwind we can find. Even 5 knots helps. Morrison, keep broadcasting our position. I want every ship and plane within 500 miles to know where we are." "Already on it, Captain." Harmon adjusted the mixture controls, leaning the fuel-air ratio as far as he dared without causing the engines to run rough. Every ounce of fuel they saved was another mile they could fly. He trimmed the aircraft carefully, trying to reduce drag, fighting the constant pull of the damaged wing. His legs were cramping from the constant pressure on the rudder pedals. His shoulders burned. He'd been holding the B-29 level for over an hour, and they had at least 5 more to go. Maybe 6. "Dutch," Kraft said quietly, "you need to rest. Let me take it for a while." "Can't. The trim's too sensitive. The second you ease off the pressure, she starts to roll. I let go, we might not recover. You can't fly for 6 hours straight." "Watch me." Below them, the Pacific stretched endlessly, invisible in the darkness. No stars. Cloud cover had moved in an hour ago, low scattered cumulus that turned the night into an absolute black void. They were flying on instruments alone, trusting altitude and heading indicators, navigating by dead reckoning and hope. 2 hours became 3. The fuel gauges dropped past 3,000 gallons. Past 2,500. Number 3 engine temperature hit 298 degrees. Then 300. Then 303. "Dutch, we have to shut down number 3, Kraft said. "It's going to seize any second." Harmon's jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. 5 more minutes. "Give me 5 more minutes." 4 minutes later, number 3 engine made the decision for them. A sharp metallic bang echoed through the airframe, followed by violent vibration. Smoke began pouring from the cowling, black and thick. "Shutting down number 3. Harmon's hands moved fast. Mixture to idle cutoff, propeller to feather, fuel shutoff closed, fire suppression armed. The propeller blades rotated to edge-on, reducing drag, and the engine wound down with a dying whine. Now they had one engine. One engine on the left wing, carrying the entire weight of a 70,000-pound bomber across 1,000 miles of ocean. "Restart number 2, Harmon said. Kraft stared at him. "Number 2 is destroyed. The collision." "I don't care. Try it." Kraft reached for the engine controls, his hand shaking slightly. He set the mixture, cracked the throttle, hit the starter. The electric motor whined, turning the propeller slowly. Once. Twice. Nothing. "It's not firing. The engine's too damaged." Harmon's eyes were locked on the altimeter. They'd dropped to 7,200 feet. With only one engine producing power, they were sinking at about 100 feet per minute. In an hour, they'd be at 1,200 feet. In 2 hours, they'd be in the water. "Transfer all fuel to the right-wing tanks," Harmon ordered. "Everything. Give number 4 every ounce we have." "Park, how far to Hawaii?" 820 miles. "Time remaining at current speed?" 4 hours, 30 minutes. "Fuel remaining?" Dietrich's voice, tight, 2,400 gallons, including the Tokyo tank transfer. Kraft did the math. "We're burning about 400 gallons per hour on one engine at maximum power. That's 6 hours of fuel. We might actually make it. Unless the leak gets worse," Dietrich added. "Or number 4 quits. Or we lose any more altitude and can't glide the last 100 miles." Harmon didn't respond. He was too busy fighting the airplane, fighting gravity, fighting the basic physics that said a B-29 couldn't fly on one engine. But it was flying. Barely. Slowly sinking, burning fuel it barely had, carrying men who refused to quit. The radio crackled to life. "Silver Lady, this is Rescue Able One. We have your position. We'll be overhead at first light. Hang in there." Morrison keyed the mic. "Copy. Rescue Able One. We'll try not to get too wet before you arrive." Through the darkness, somewhere ahead, Hawaii waited. 300 miles of runway, hospitals, safety. If they could reach it. If the engine held. If the fuel lasted. If. The sun rose at 0612 hours, and with it came the reckoning. Captain Harmon saw it first, not the sun itself, but the way it painted the ocean below in shades of gray and silver, revealing just how close they were to the water. The altimeter read 3,400 feet. 3 hours ago, they'd been at 7,800. The math was simple and terrible. They were sinking at roughly 100 feet every 20 minutes. At that rate, they'd be in the water before reaching Hawaii. "Altitude's critical," Harmon said, his voice rough from hours of silence. His arms were numb, his legs felt like dead weights on the rudder pedals. He'd been flying for nearly 5 hours straight, every muscle locked in place, holding the B-29 level with nothing but pressure and willpower. "Dietrich, do we have anything left to throw out?" "Negative. We dumped everything that isn't bolted down. We're flying an empty shell." Through the windscreen, the sky was clearing. High cirrus clouds streaked across pale blue, and far ahead, maybe just visible through the haze, there might have been a dark smudge on the horizon. Or maybe that was just hope playing tricks on desperate eyes. Park, distance to Oahu? 340 miles. 2 hours, maybe less. Fuel status. Dietrich's response came after a pause. He'd been watching the gauges drop with the focused intensity of a man watching a clock tick down to 0. 1,100 gallons. At current consumption rate, that's 2 hours and 45 minutes of fuel. Kraft turned to look at Harmon, his face gaunt with exhaustion. "We might actually make it. We're still sinking. Even if we have fuel, we might not have altitude." As if to punctuate his words, the B-29 shuddered, dropping another 50 feet in a sudden downdraft. Harmon fought the controls, pulling the nose up, but the aircraft responded sluggishly. It was on the edge of a stall, flying so slow and heavy that the aerodynamics were barely keeping it airborne. "Airspeed is 145 knots, Kraft called out. "Stall speed is 140 at this weight." "I know. Dutch, if we slow down any more." "I know." The single engine on the left wing, number 4, right R 3350, 2,200 horsepower, 18 cylinders of raw mechanical power, was screaming. The cylinder head temperatures were past 290 degrees. The oil pressure was fluctuating. The propeller governor was fighting to maintain RPM against the massive load. If that engine quit, they'd glide for maybe 10 minutes before hitting the water. "Silver Lady, this is Rescue Able 1. We have you visual at your 11 o'clock, 4 miles. The voice was calm, professional, a lifeline of normalcy in the chaos. Harmon looked up and left. There, a Navy PBY Catalina flying boat, painted in rescue orange and white, cruising parallel to them at about the same altitude. It waggled its wings in recognition. "Rescue Able 1, we're at minimum controllable airspeed with one engine. If we go down, it's going to be fast." "Copy that, Silver Lady. We'll stay with you. We have rescue boats en route to your position. You've got about 20 surface vessels tracking you, all converging on your course line." 20 ships. The Navy had scrambled everything they had, destroyers, patrol boats, even a submarine, spreading them along the B-29's projected path like breadcrumbs. If they went down, rescue would be minutes away, not hours. If they survived the ditching. "How are the wounded?" Harmon asked over the intercom. Dietrich's voice came back quiet. "Chen's stable but weak. Lost a lot of blood. Rodriguez is hanging in there. Kimball's conscious, concussion symptoms but alert. They'll all make it if we get them to a hospital soon. If." The altimeter ticked down to 3,200 feet. Then 3,000. Harmon's mind was racing through scenarios. If they ditched, The B-29 would hit the water nose first at about 120 knots. The fuselage would break apart behind the wing. It always did. Structural physics were unforgiving. The nose section might stay afloat for a few minutes, long enough for survivors to get out. Maybe. The wounded would never make it out in time. "We're not ditching," Harmon said flatly. "We make it to Oahu or we die trying." Dutch. That's final. 2,800 feet. The radio crackled again. "Silver Lady, this is Hickam Tower. We have you on radar. Bearing 273, range 280 miles. We're clearing all traffic. Your priority 1. Every runway on the island is yours." "Copy. Hickam. We're going to need the longest one you've got. And crash trucks. Lots of crash trucks." 2,600 feet. Park's voice came up from the navigator's station, thin with stress. "Captain, I'm picking up a headwind. 10 knots, maybe more. It's going to slow us down." Harmon felt something cold settle in his chest. A headwind meant more time in the air, which meant more fuel burned, which meant less margin for error. The math that had been balanced on a knife's edge was tilting the wrong way. "Adjust the course."